Rain lashed against the windshield. Alexander gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. His headlights cut through the dense fog, revealing only fleeting glimpses of the road ahead. He was late, much later than he intended, but the storm had been unexpected. His aunt's village was remote, nestled in a valley shrouded by ancient forests. Now, as the storm raged around him, he felt a shiver of unease creep up his spine. The old handwritten directions his aunt had sent were becoming difficult to decipher. He squinted, trying to make out the next landmark. The storm seemed to be intensifying, mirroring the unease twisting in his gut. He had to reach his aunt's house. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. The house loomed out of the fog, a looming silhouette against the storm-racked sky. It stood on a hill overlooking the village, shrouded in mist and darkness. Its windows were dark, lifeless eyes staring out at him. Alexander stopped the car at the foot of the long, overgrown driveway. He turned off the engine, the sudden silence deafening in the aftermath of the storm symphony. He sat there for a moment, heart hammering against his ribs, a strange premonition settling in his gut. The house, always imposing, felt different, sinister even. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to the exhaustion and the unsettling weather. His aunt must be worried, alone in this storm. He grabbed his bag, pushing open the car door and stepping out into the deluge. The rain was cold, biting into him through his jacket. He hurried up the path, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the silence, each step drawing him closer to the imposing structure that awaited him. As he climbed the steps to the porch, he noticed the front door was ajar. A sliver of darkness beckoned him from within. Aunt Eleanor, his voice echoed in the stillness, swallowed by the oppressive silence. The air inside was heavy, thick with dust and the lingering scent of dampness. Cobwebs clung to the corners, evidence of long neglect. He moved cautiously into the house, his unease growing with each step. He called out again, his voice a hesitant whisper in the stillness. There was no reply. The silence was unnerving, a palpable entity that pressed down on him. The air grew colder as he descended the basement stairs, a musty, earthy smell filling his nostrils. He found his aunt in the basement in her favorite rocking chair facing the wall. "Aunt Eleanor, I'm here, His words died in his throat. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek. It was ice cold. He whirled around, heart pounding against his ribs. The basement was empty, the shadows dancing in the flickering light from the single bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. Had he imagined it? The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, a primal fear gripping him. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was not alone, that something dark and unseen lurked in the shadows. He strained his ears, listening for any sound, any indication of what had moved. The silence was complete, suffocating. A low whisper, barely audible, sent a fresh wave of terror through him. It seemed to come from the shadows themselves, slithering around the edges of his perception. His pulse quickened, his breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. He backed away, his gaze darting from one shadowy corner to another, searching for the source of the sound. He had to get out, had to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the basement of the house. But the fear, cold and paralyzing, held him captive. Section 5. The shadow descends. The shadow returned, darker and more defined this time. It coalesced in the corner of the room, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It pulsed and shifted, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape, but twisted and wrong. Fear turned his blood to ice. This was no trick of the light, no figment of his imagination. This was something else, something ancient and evil. Its presence filled the basement, a palpable weight that pressed down on him, stealing his breath. It moved towards him, gliding across the floor without a sound. Panic surged through him, breaking the paralysis that had gripped him. He stumbled back, his hand frantically searching for the stairs. He had to get out, had to escape the nightmare unfolding before his eyes. But the shadow was faster. It lunged, a silent scream erupting from the abyss, its darkness reaching for him, threatening to consume him. The stench of decay, sharp and acrid, filled his nostrils, suffocating him. Section 6, trapped. He threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding the shadow's grasp. He scrambled back, his heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. The shadow shifted, changing direction with an unnatural fluidity that defied the laws of physics. It was relentless, its cold, empty gaze fixed on him, its presence radiating an aura of malice that chilled him to the bone. The silence, once oppressive, was now shattered by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of his heart. He scrambled to his feet, adrenaline lending him a burst of strength. He had to get out, had to escape the suffocating darkness of the basement. He could feel the shadow's presence closing in on him, its icy breath sending shivers down his spine. He lunged for the stairs, his hand grasping for the railing. But the shadow was there, blocking his escape, its form shifting and swirling, a vortex of darkness that threatened to consume him whole. Section 7. A desperate gamble. His hand connected with a heavy object, sending a jolt of pain shooting up his arm. He looked down, his fingers closing around a dusty, old lantern. It was a slim hope, but a hope nonetheless. He fumbled with the lighter, his fingers trembling, the metallic click echoing in the silence. A flicker of flame erupted, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The shadow recoiled, hissing like water on hot coals, its form flickering in the sudden light. The light seemed to repel it, to hold it at bay. He raised the lantern, the weak flame his only shield against the darkness that threatened to engulf him. He backed away slowly, his gaze never leaving the writhing shadow. He had to reach the stairs, had to escape the suffocating confines of the basement. He moved with a cautiousness born of terror, each step a victory against the fear that threatened to consume him. Section 8. Into the fog. He scrambled up the basement stairs, his lungs burning, the lantern casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls. He didn't look back, didn't dare to see if the shadow was following. He burst out of the house and into the storm, the rain a welcome assault after the oppressive atmosphere within. The fog was thicker now, swirling around him like a shroud. He didn't waste time looking back at the house, at the nightmare he had just escaped. He ran towards his car, a beacon of familiarity in the swirling chaos. The engine sputtered to life, a sound of salvation in the night. He slammed the car into gear and pulled away, the tires spitting gravel as he fled. He didn't slow down, didn't stop until the house was a distant memory in his rearview mirror, swallowed by the fog and the darkness. Section 9. The haunting truth. He drove through the night, the storm finally abating, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. His mind raced, trying to process the events of the night, to rationalize the unexplainable. But the terror lingered, a cold knot in his gut, a constant reminder of the darkness he had witnessed. He thought of his aunt, her lifeless eyes staring into the void. The memory sent a fresh wave of grief and horror washing over him. He had gone to her seeking solace, seeking refuge from his own demons. Instead, he had found something far more sinister, something that would forever haunt his waking hours. He had stumbled into a nightmare, a realm where shadows danced and whispered, where ancient evils lurked in the darkness. He had escaped with his life, but at what cost? Section 10 never escaped the silence. He arrived home as dawn was breaking, the pale light of a new day doing little to dispel the darkness that clung to him. He was safe for now. But the silence of his apartment was different now, heavier, filled with unseen eyes that watched his every move. He was no longer alone. Not really. The shadows had followed him home. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never escape the events of that night. The terror would linger, a constant companion, a shadow lurking at the edge of his vision. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back, and in its depths he had seen a reflection of his own mortality, a chilling reminder that some things are best left undisturbed, buried in the darkness. He was forever changed, marked by the silent scream of the shadows. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel.